Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote podcast. I'm back in the home office with the buttery voice microphone, and if you're tuning in on YouTube, you'll see me in some formal attire with a proper tie. I've gotten rid of the Guayabera. I'm not in Mexico City anymore, hence why I do have an internet connection, and I don't smell any sewage, so I am back in Washington, D.C. Mike Madrid, it's good to see you, brother.
That's a clip-on tie for those of you at home, by the way. Keep that in mind.
Nobody's scoring the clip-on. Stop it.
And I am so glad to have you back. There's so much to cover, so much going on. I hope business was productive for you, and I hope you had a great visit. I thought it was awesome that you were there in the Basilica de la Virgen de Guadalupe at the same time Donald Trump was wishing a happy birthday to Mary on post social. Literally, the internet starts blowing up, and Chuck texts me and he's like, "Hey, man, I happen to be here at the Basilica with the image of the Virgen de Guadalupe and the Juan Diego's cloak." So if you don't know what I'm talking about, just scroll back to the Twitter feed a little bit, Google it. Good stuff. But we've got a lot to cover, so let's just kind of keep marching forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just touch on that 1 second and say that Ebony Payne, my new wife, is obsessed with the story about this whole thing. She had no idea. She grew up, she's a Black woman in D.C., not very religious, but now she's went down a rabbit hole about how this cloak has been diagnosed and how people have looked at it and how it's not supposed to have lasted. Oh my God. Y'all need to Google all of this. We'll do a whole separate episode. I'm not big on knowing all the details of the Catholic religion. I'll admit that.
This is a perfect episode for me. I can walk you all down all the rabbit holes.
I need this with my notes. Anyway, two things is going to happen today, boys and girls who've been listening. There's two things that we have to talk about. One is we know that Mike Madrid has nonstop been talking about North Carolina. He is so bullish on North Carolina. I said, we need to get a Latina from North Carolina here today. And I'm going to be introducing a special guest to us. On the first half of the show, we're going to go deep on North Carolina, just like we promised all you listeners for half of the show. And then we're going to cut our guest loose and let her go back to her day job. And me and Mike Madrid are going to do a deep dive on the murder we saw last night on TV, which happened between Donald Trump and Vice President Harris. And I cannot wait. I was following and laughing at all of Mike's tweets last night, which were hilarious. We'll get to talk about that in a minute. But first, let me talk about my sister, Irene Godínez. I'm going to mess up your last name. I'm just going to say it now, right? Who is from North Carolina. She runs Poder NC. She's a dear sister of mine. Now, I get to work with lots of great people. I get to work with lots of great organizations. But me and my sister here have been through the trolls and tribulations of why is nobody giving us no money? Why can't we go do better work? Why can't we speak up at the table at the state? All the things that we see that all of these orgs in the states, in the community go through every day. My sister, Irene, has been through this lock, stock, and barrel. She has built something from nothing there. Irene, welcome to the show. And I apologize in advance for anything Mike Madrid may say.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, Godínez is
Thank you.
My last name, but I'm so honored to be here with you, Chuck, mi hermano, and Mike. It is wonderful to meet a North Carolina groupie, a North Carolina lover. Happy to have you down here anytime.
Yeah,
Since you're my friend, go ahead.
Little quick breaking news. I'm hoping to, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I am so bullish on North Carolina. I want to document some of what is being told there for the Latino Vote podcast and other sources. So I'm hoping to get down there during the final stretch and actually be on the ground in North Carolina. So Irene, I will be with you, my sister, hopefully, and I'm gonna need your hand to guide me around.
Absolutely.
Awesome. You need to take him to all the good barbecue places and all the good taco places is what he'll need to see.
Barbecue carnitas, we got you.
Oh, boom, 2 in 1. So since you're my friend, I get to ask the first question. And I think it's really important, as much as we talk about all this new immigration, the new growth in North Carolina, how Latinos are the biggest growing. Tell me a few things. I want to hear your story of how you got to North Carolina. A. B. Tell me about why and how you started Poder NC. And then three-part question, boom, 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 is tell me about the Latinos in North Carolina. Do they all live in one city? They live in multiple cities? And what are they like? So your journey, how you started Poder, and then what does the demographic look like in the state?
Yeah. So I am blessed and lucky that I was born in North Carolina. I am the daughter of 2 Mexican immigrants who were migrant farm workers. And so I am their tobacco child. They were working on tobacco when I was born. I like to think of my siblings and I as the souvenirs of their journeys, of my parents' journeys. So my brother's an orange kid. He was born in Florida. I'm tobacco, and my sister is strawberries. She's also born here in North Carolina. And it was actually an accident that led to us establishing roots in Durham. One of our family members needed to be hospitalized, and it forced us to be grounded, which was a huge blessing for our family. My dad became the first Latino to establish a construction contracting company in North Carolina. They eventually were able to gain citizenship through the amnesty of '86. So I actually grew up thinking that Ronald Reagan was my grandfather because my parents revered him and said, "He's your grandfather." But it was because they were so grateful for the amnesty, and the way that they connected like government services was with the president. And so that benefit of amnesty that they worked hard for, it wasn't just given to them. They did put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, literally into the fields. So I grew up in a North Carolina that looked very different than the North Carolina that we experience right now. When I was growing up, my dad is super entrepreneurial, and we were the Latino blockbuster because there were no places that you could go to that had any cultural things like music or movies. And somehow he got connected to someone in California that just sent him. He bought like wholesale all of these videos from Mexican movies from the 1950s, Cine de Oro. So like Pedro Infante, Cantinflas, like all of that. And then there were mostly single men here in North Carolina when I was growing up. So everything was word of mouth. We all knew each other. Literally, there was a man, Don Marcelo, who saw the opportunity with all of the single men that were here who were lacking tortillas in the store and chiles and home cooked meals. And so he would travel bi-weekly to Chicago to buy chiles and chorizo and queso and all of that, and then would literally door-to-door canvas. And we would say, Don Marcelo, like, allá viven, like, cuatro hombres or whatever. We all knew each other.
Wow.
And so when I get so excited thinking of like one day an anthropologist will do a study and research on all of this. And thankfully, right now, we're still a young enough community that all of these people are still here. Don Marcelo now owns an entire empire with tortillerias and carnicerias and other Latino stores. My dad ended up training hundreds of Masons that have gone on to build North Carolina, like literally build North Carolina. And he's now retired. But it wasn't until after I graduated high school that this huge influx of Latinos started to come into North Carolina, and that you saw this like 500% growth in our population. And so it changed the dynamics. Whereas before we were kind of like, people were curious about us and they would come to fiestas that were mostly like food-based, to suddenly feeling threatened. And you would see David Duke rallies in small towns like Siler City, where they shut it down because there was a KKK rally. And I started doing a lot of immigrant justice work because of how I grew up, because I was the kid who interpreted for my family and their friends, because I was the one in the hospitals, after my mom's friends gave birth, the one that was interpreting, because we didn't have a lot of the infrastructure that I think a lot of people take for granted in other states. All of this is a huge reason why I started Poder, because despite my age, I'm 42 years old. I've never met another North Carolina-born Latinx person who's older than me, first of all. And I've never met another Latinx person who has more political experience in the state than I do. So a lot of times people will call me up because I am the senior political person in the state, and that's not okay. And so, well, that is a leadership development organization at the end of the day, because I intend to replace myself 100-fold. We have the talent. We have incredible pockets of resistance in our state where our community has revitalized a lot of the smaller towns. We're everywhere in North Carolina. We are the backbone of a lot of rural North Carolina. We are an agricultural heavy state. And so, of course, we're out in the fields, but we're also at Lenovo and SAS and all of these tech companies. And I think that we're starting to see a lot more engagement because of that in our political process. And those individuals need a political home. And so Poder came about because I saw the writing on the wall. In 2020, at the beginning of 2020, there was only one Latino C4 organization in the state, and they didn't lead with progressive values. And when I saw that the number of Latino youth who were born in North Carolina, that they would age in by 2024 into the electorate, it felt like, all right, we got to build it. I got to build an organization to begin to invest in the civic education of these young people so that by the time that they age in, they know how to vote, who to vote for, and that they're excited and creating a new tradition, kind of like quinceañeras, that you're looking forward to your quinceañera, looking forward to voting because it is such a privilege. And I remember my first time voting, it was the year 2000. And I thought I knew what was on my ballot, but I was shocked when I got in there and there were more people on the ballot than the president. And rather than walking out, with pride, I walked out deflated and feeling like I failed my family because I didn't know how to vote for the rest of the people. I don't want that experience for other North Carolinians. And so Poder focuses heavily on civic education, on leadership development, all of it from a values perspective. We are pro-Black, pro-Latinx, pro-LGBTQ+, and pro-reproductive justice. And honestly, those are the principles and values of the organization, because those are my principles and values and experience in working at Planned Parenthood and working on immigrant justice and being the daughter of immigrants and being a queer woman as well.
Mike?
This is extraordinary. Like, my mind is going in a million different directions, and just how one, impressed, and two, proud I am of the work that you are doing and what you're pushing the envelope in, not just for our community. We'll get to this in just a second, but for a kid who grew up in the Southwest, a Mexican American kid who grew up in the Southwest, life was very different. I didn't have those challenges. Like, you are truly and you're saying at 42 years old, there's nobody older than you. You are like the pioneer. You are at the front edge of pushing the envelope. And I think this story is just extraordinary. Can you tell me, like, when you started to see, as you mentioned, a lot more of Mexicanos, Latinos, Central Americans, who were they? Where were they coming from? And what were they coming for during that migratory wave? And was that the 90s, basically?
That was
early 2000s?
Yeah, so the late 90s. Just to kind of give you a very vivid example, when my siblings and I were in school, K through 12, we were the only Latino kids in our schools, K through 12. There were maybe like two other
This is
Latino
Durham?
kids in Durham, North Carolina. Now, when I go back to my elementary school, it is 80% Latino. 80% Latino. And when I went to college, that was my first time being surrounded by Latinos. And it's a huge reason.
Where was college?
NC State University.
North Carolina State.
So I started at East Carolina University, but I graduated from NC State. And so growing up the way that I did, I always had a yearning to belong somewhere because I knew I wasn't white. I knew I wasn't Black. There wasn't anything else. Like, we would go to the mall with my mom and people would literally stop us and give us money and they'd be like, y'all are so cute. And it wasn't until later that I connected that all of the Save the Kids commercials had kids that looked like me, and that's probably where it was coming from. But the changes really started to happen in the late 90s, but really early 2000s. When I went to college, the Latinos that I was surrounded by were mostly international students. It still wasn't North Carolinians. Now, my university has started a Latino alumni network. The majority of the graduates are now starting to be North Carolina born or raised or somewhere else in the continental US. But the shift happened, and I can demark exactly when we went from a state that was like okay with having people like us to suddenly like no, and it was the Sensenbrenner bill. So back in 2004, 2005, when we were starting to see a lot of the news from Congress that there was this bill that was suddenly criminalizing being an immigrant, being undocumented, and there were rallies and Day Without an Immigrant and things like that. That's at that point, that's when I started my nonprofit career at an organization that had previously been mostly a cultural-based organization, but at that point, they started to do voter registration. And I remember we shut down a town called Siler City that had previously hosted David Duke for the KKK. And so we intentionally chose Siler City because it's literally the middle of North Carolina. And it's a place that was dying, a community that was dying. And suddenly it was revitalized because of the immigrant labor force that came from there. There's poultry factories that are there. North Carolina also has the largest pork processing plant in the world, largest producer of sweet potatoes. Like, we're the largest of a lot of things. So when you have all of these needs for labor, of course, that's going to draw in people. There were literal signs in Mexico, billboards that said, looking for opportunity, come to North Carolina. And all of this is documented in a book. I'm happy to share the information and link to that. But so there was intentional recruitment of labor for North Carolina. With that labor also came the opportunity to build out, because it coincided with us becoming and cementing our place as a technology state as well. So Research Triangle Park started to build out. So when you're needing to build out, you're going to need that construction labor force. You're going to need the people that are cleaning houses for the people that are moving in. So it's like at the same time that North Carolina was booming with our technology, that was an invitation for immigrants to come into our state. And that is what led to a lot of people feeling threatened. We were one of the places where there used to be this anti-immigrant organization that was started by the chief of staff for a state senator. And it ended up becoming one of the biggest anti-immigrant organizations in the country. And they started out of North Carolina and had a lot of success. Our proximity to DC has also been a bit of a blessing, because we've been able to mobilize people to DC for like immigrant rallies and things like that. And back in 2010, when Reform Immigration for America started to create a national campaign, that's where I cut my teeth on how to do electoral organizing. And that was the beginning of us beginning to, plant a flag and to say, we also belong here. This is also our state. Our state motto is to be rather than to seem, and nobody else embodies that more than Latinos and immigrants and Black and brown people. And so we're just stepping into a legacy of North Carolinians resisting and fighting and moving our country forward in the way that a lot of the Black community had laid the groundwork and foundation for us. And I feel really fortunate that I grew up in a Black community, because while it's not necessarily my culture and my history, I've been taken under by a lot of Black leaders who saw something in me and began to nurture my leadership, which, again, a huge reason why we lead as an organization with saying that we're pro-Black, because we won't be able to agree on immigration or anything else if we can't agree that Black Lives Matter and that we need to make sure that we address some of the issues there.
There's so much to unpack here, and again, it's just such a beautiful story of American identity, of the immigrant story, of Black-Brown relationships. But I want to put a little bit of context in terms of the demography here, if I could, because what you were saying is a personification exactly of what I was trying to convey in my book, and why I'm so excited about what's happening in North Carolina. Okay. Irene, you are again, you're this pioneer. You're kind of one of the first daughters of immigrants that comes to Tobacco Road, and your folks are working in the fields. You are a leader simply by age when another wave of migrants from Mexico and Central America come in such large numbers that you are in the 90s. You're one of a handful of Mexicanos in school. And now it's 80% Latino. And this is 20 years ago. Okay. The Sensenbrenner bill is almost 20 years ago when the backlash, the white lash starts in response to saying this needs to stop. This needs to slow down. This is important because I want listeners to understand over that 20-year horizon, a lot of children are being born. They're being both brought here as immigrants, but also they're being born to the sons and daughters of immigrants, and now populating those schools. And so when I'm talking about the demographic change, everything Irene just pointed out in her own personal life and story is showing that 20 years ago, these voters are registering 2 years ago, or are registering every day now. The fastest part by huge numbers of what is growing are these people turning 18 every day. Latinos, immigrants themselves, or the sons and daughters of immigrants. This is that young youth vote that we're talking about in North Carolina. The numbers, and again, there's obviously a wide swath of African Americans, of Black voters in North Carolina, but the numbers, the projections of percentage growth are overwhelmingly Latinos. So much so that we're 3% of the voters and growing rapidly. But there's no public poll ever taken of North Carolina that has a 3% subsample of Latinos. It's in that weird sweet spot where it's too small to measure in public opinion, but it's big enough by a wide measure to make a difference in the outcome of the races in a state where the top of the ticket is usually decided by 50 to 70,000 votes. You're talking 250, 280,000 Latinos will be voting, most of them breaking at least 60-40, probably more, for the Democratic campaign. And that's why I think this is so unique, and why people aren't noticing what is happening. They're looking at, and again, you said this very beautifully, very eloquently, the investments in the research triangle was bringing a lot of largely white, college-educated voters who, while they may be fiscally conservative, have more socially and culturally progressive values. But at the same time, the people building the infrastructure are Latinos. So you have this massive influx of two demographics as the state's economy is changing that will forever redirect the political, social, and culture future of North Carolina. This all began 2 decades ago, and we are literally seeing the daily impacts of this on the voter rolls right now at this moment in time.
Absolutely. And I think it's also anyone's game. Unidos US just came out with research that says that most Latinos in the country haven't been talked to by either political party, right? Which to me says that this election will be won by those of us doing independent political work. So organizations like Poder en Sí Action. There is no one else who will love on our community and invest in our community like we ourselves can do. And this is a huge reason why Poder exists, because I knew that I couldn't be the only progressive Latina in North Carolina or values leading Latina. I learned my values from my parents, who I think that if you ask them, they wouldn't say they're progressive. They would say that they care about family, they care about freedom, they care about opportunity and education. Environment. My mom's issue is the environment, which was very surprising to me. But there is a huge opportunity with our community. And I think that when organizations only focus on the tried and true voters, you are leaving money on the table. You are leaving a huge opportunity to really begin to nurture a community that is eager to plug in. Last night, we had a debate watch party, and we began to plug it 2 days prior, and we ended up having about 20, 25 people, something like that, that showed up with just a text message inviting them to come. But it wasn't just a text message. It was the cultural, relevant way of communication. It was the way that we make people feel seen when they show up, and not like just another number and check and you're here. But we have to treat our voters, Latino voters, any of our voters, we have to treat them like family if we actually want to get beyond the transactional, individualistic way of engaging people electorally. Poder is building out not just to win in November, but we're building out a political home so that we can also hold people accountable, so that we can get more representation. Because as a state that is as diverse as North Carolina, there's no reason we can't have more Latino electeds. We currently have 0 representation at the state House or Senate. We have 0 representation federally. We had one person that ran statewide earlier in the year in the primary, but did not get the support. He did not get the type of support that he needed from the Democratic Party. So while there's also a lot to be said about us educating and informing ourselves, we also need the parties to live into their values. If you say you're about diversity, then show it by the investments that you make in our voters, and not just when we become tried and true voters. It matters what is done at the forefront and the beginning. I will also say, I know that we're probably running over time, but that being a pioneer, like y'all were describing, like you were saying, Mike, is it sounds nice, but it also comes with so many sacrifices and us rocking the boat and risking being left out of things, because when we speak truth to power, they don't like it. And so when we said early in the year after the primaries, North Carolina, y'all just have right now a pale, stale mail ballot. That's the truth. At that point, we had Joe Biden at the top and then mostly white folks down the rest of the ballot. That is not something that we made up. It is true. So if people don't like the critique of things like that, then they need to be investing more in our candidates. They need to be supporting our candidates and figuring out how to level the playing field. Because when I recruited Ricky Hurtado to run for state house, and he became our first progressive Latino elected in the state legislature in 2020, the Democratic Party recruited against him 4 times. They asked 4 other people to run against Ricky, and they didn't believe that the son of immigrants could win in a conservative area, and he won. And I remember saying to the person who was pushing back, who was the chair of recruitment at the time for the Democratic Party, I said, we did it. We got him elected. And he said, well, we'll see if he gets reelected. So that is not the attitude that we need to have if we are truly about building a representative democracy. And I love this state. I have our state motto tattooed on my wrist. I am diehard North Carolinian. I believe in our potential and our capacity. I know that we will be the difference this election. And, in 2016, Roy Cooper won the governorship by 10,000 votes.
Right.
10,000. So this election is going to boil down to 1% all over again. And so much of the money goes to the establishment. And I'm saying, like, y'all were saying earlier in the year, give Irene $1 million. Now I'm saying, give me $1 million, give Poder $1 million. We will turn people out because we have incredible programming. It's innovative. It's culturally relevant. People feel seen, and they, more than anything, it brings joy and it makes people feel like they belong. And that's all we want. We want to know that we belong in the state that we love and that we can set roots here so that our children can thrive. And there are many other little Irenes out in North Carolina, and I'm no more special than any of the other kids that are being born and raised in the state. We just need, I'm so grateful to y'all, like, for having me here, because it just feels like I have always been like, North Carolina. And it's like, oh, finally, people are starting to see the potential in North Carolina. But it also matters, like, where you're putting your investment. Again, independent leaning organizations are going to be the ones that seal the deal. And we need y'all's funding and support. And
how can people contribute, Irene, to Poder?
If you go to poderncaction.org, we have a donate link there. Y'all can follow us on social media at Poder NC Action, where you can see more about our programming. We have an innovative program called Ballots y Belleza, where we're going to be giving free beauty services to new voters, new Latino voters. So you will come, you will get your nails done by a values-led beauty service provider. While you're a captive audience getting your nails done, a volunteer will be guiding you through your ballot and telling you not only, like, who is running for governor, but what does the governor do? What does the state treasurer do? All of that. And then we'll tell you who we endorse. We're going to have beautiful backdrops for people to take selfies so that they can, when they upload it, it can be a conversation starter with their networks and their families, because at the end of the day, it boils down to relationships and how we're activating our own personal networks and our relationships. So that event is on September 29th. I would love for you to come down for that.
Yeah.
So get to experience
North Carolina. Get my nails did, and Chuck can get his hair done.
Yeah. You sure can. You can get your eyebrows waxed.
Yeah. Yeah. Unbelievable. Chuck, go ahead and run us through this.
Again, we can talk about this shit, or we can do something about it. Go to that website. Give me the website one more time, Irene.
PoderNCAction.org. And our social media handles are at PoderNCAction.
So what we need to do is not only donate everybody, but also share with everybody. Like, this is one of the places, all the things, and the reason I just shut up in this conversation, I'll have plenty to say after the break, is everything that Mike has wrote about in his book, the things that we've talked about, the potential here. My sister, that's why I wanted to have her on, talked about, she's brought this to life with real stories, right? And what it's like. The fastest growing group of voters are going to be these first and second generation kids that are born in America because their families immigrated like Irene's did. A lot of our families did. Thank you for being on today, Irene. We're going to have you back. You're going to have to meet with Mike, and I'll connect y'all via text message myself. That way y'all can put together. Because when this is over and she wins North Carolina, we're going to have you back to talk about how you did it, and how your team did it, and all the things. And so, look, I have a lot of privilege too, and I get to work with you. We love working with you. You and Daisy, my partner in crime, Daisy Gonzalez, who works with me, works with Irene every day. They're currently working on this novella video thing on digital. There's always something new that they're doing over there that's just different. Me and Mike talk about doing things different. We did a mail project for them 2 cycles ago that had Walter Mercado on it. People were taking the mail pieces and putting them on their refrigerators. Like, this is real innovative stuff, not the same old TV ad. Sister, thank you again for being here today. And really, everybody go to the website. Don't forget about PoderNCAction.org. Do your stuff. And thank you, Irene, for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, Mike, that was a great conversation with our sister from North Carolina. I feel like we could do 2 hours with her, but I know we needed to get to what happened last night and talk about the debate. We're talking and coming to you live on Wednesday morning after the debate. The carcass of Donald Trump has been drugged through the streets of Philadelphia and all over Twitter. Mike, before I give any comment, what did you think? If for any of you who live under a rock and who weren't following Mike Madrid on Twitter last night, you would already know what he thinks, but please tell our audience what you think happened last night at the debate.
Well, look, I was having a good time with it. It's not too often that you see somebody get a good ass whooping the way Donald Trump got last night. And I'm saying that obviously I'm a little bit biased here. I mean, I hate the guy. I've been spent the last 8 years of my life and career, working against him. But Kamala Harris did absolutely everything that she needed to do here. She checked all of the boxes. She looked presidential. She came across as capable, competent, very passionate in a lot of her issues, and especially on the reproductive rights issues. But she also was aggressive, appropriately aggressive where she needed to, and appropriately defensive where she needed to be. All of this is very difficult, especially for a non-traditional candidate. It's tough for any candidate to overcome that kind of a barrier. But as a Black woman running for the president of the United States, to do all of this was really, really a masterclass in how to reassure a country that is probably a little bit too partisan and locked down, and at the same time undecided with some of the key groups that she needed. There was just so many things she needed to do. There were so many needles she needed to thread, and she did it really masterfully. Now, having said that, she was given a great assist by Donald Trump, who was just a complete buffoon in this thing. And the crazy old man came out, and he's not going to be able to be put back into the closet. He's doubling down on the big lie, talking about immigrants eating pets, being a leader in fertilization, not being able to talk about Ukraine, the need to win in Ukraine, and over and over and over. I mean, there's just so much here that was bad and wrong for Donald Trump. I have very rarely seen a contrast this significant, except, of course, for the Biden-Trump debate earlier this year. But let me put this in context. I'm going to kick it over to you, Chuck. The CNN flash poll right afterwards said that Trump lost this debate 63-37. Kamala Harris getting 63% of support, Trump getting 37%. That is the exact same number in reverse that Biden and Trump got in the end of June, early July, that pushed put Biden out of this race. That's how badly he was perceived to have lost. So I don't know. You were watching, Chuck. What were your thoughts on it?
Look, I have obviously a lot of the same reactions, but I want to talk about the tactics of it. I'm one of the few people in America who have prepped somebody for a debate. I'm one of the few people in America that are brown who prep people for debates. I'm a tactician of the game. I know what's happening as I watch it. I tweeted, not as much as Mike Madrid, but earlier in the day about how I'm like a football coach watching somebody else play football and watching the other coaches and how they're calling the plays of the game, because I'm in charge of calling the plays for my games. And last night, watching how eloquently she could put together what she wanted to do. She was well prepared. She could tell she's a lawyer. All lawyers that are candidates are good at memorization. So she didn't have to have all the notes. She had spent a week memorizing. When we talk about immigration, we're going to talk about this. When we talk about Ukraine. And if you look, and this is the most important piece, when you look at the way she answered a question, let's just take the one little piece of immigration. She knew that in the first 30 to 45 seconds, she's going to say, I'm the only one standing on the stage who's prosecuted multinational cartels for trafficking drugs, people, and whatever she said third, I have prosecuted them, and I'm the only one who's done that. And at the Biden administration, we did this, this, and this. And then before, because this is her weakest point to Mike Madrid. He talks about this all the time. Like, this is her Achilles heel, is the immigration stuff. At least that's what Republicans think. And it is, because she has to defend what's been going on. And there's a million ways you could do this. But then before she gives up all of her answers and then Donald Trump can come back and call her out, she goes, let me tell you about his rallies. And I was like, holy shit. I know exactly what she's doing. Is she answered in the first 45 seconds the immigration part of the question so she can say she answered it. And then she went to talk about his rallies during the immigration response, which will set him off, and he'll spend his time reacting to being mad about her saying something about his rallies instead of him holding her accountable on immigration. That was just one series of questions, and she did it with every single question. She made him go down a rabbit hole on the economy. She made him go down a rabbit hole on whatever. Like, it was, she set the bait after each question, and he gobbled it up like when I go fishing and put a fresh minnow on a hook and put it right out in front of a fish, they can't help themselves. That was the biggest difference of the masterclass that I saw last night, was she knew exactly what she was doing, and he ate it up every single time, Mike.
He just cannot help himself. He's got to take the debate. And I think the strategy going into the debate and the way she executed were just completely flawless. They understand this man. He's not that hard to figure out. He is peculiar. He is odd. But after 8 years of watching this, they knew exactly what to do, from the direct handshake, which was just smart brilliance tactically, shook him up from the beginning. Like you said, her cadence, her delivery. She used the term old and tired half a dozen times. She went after his rallies. That was when the wheels came off. Like you could see him.
You put that up last night. Mike tweeted, he was like, here's the time of death. And then he put up, that's from that point forward, he was just fucking mad, right, Mike?
Yeah, that was it. And that's the goal. Is he was trying to be staid and calm, and you know that was what they worked on in debate prep for a long period of time. And then, but once you hit him on the rallies, like he just the crazy old codger came out of the cage, and once he's out, he's out. He feels like he feels like he's in control and mastering the situation, the same way he does at his rallies, when he's really just kind of drooling on himself and, spittle flecked, tirades going on and on and on about sharks and boats and windmills causing cancer and, Hannibal Lecter. And I think I love the idea too. This was great. Where Kamala Harris invited people to go to his rallies, because now she can take credit for whatever size they are and say they've left and say, I told you so. I was brilliant, just all the way around. She was extremely well prepared, and she executed extremely well. Now, there is a question as to what this actually means in terms of the outcome of the actual race. That's a different consideration. But as I said on a radio show this morning, we are extremely stratified. The electorate is extremely polarized. There's not a whole lot of people that are undecided, and probably a lot of those people weren't watching. But having said that, would you rather, win commandingly than break even or lose? Of course you would. And perhaps most importantly, I think this is the key. The one data point that I'm looking at now, as the race is falling right back into 2020 lines, is where's the enthusiasm gap? Who's going to show up to vote, and what's the turnout model going to look like? Democrats went into this debate up by 14 in the enthusiasm gap. There's no question that number is going to get bigger, that the Democrats are going to be more excited, more enthusiastic about supporting Kamala Harris, and that Republicans, even if it's a point or two, are going to be taking a deep, long look at their candidate and going, man, this guy again, shit, this is the guy we keep putting up. As much as we try to dismiss it as just Donald Trump being Donald Trump or doing what he does, a 1% depression in his numbers is going to be very, very significant.
Over the last 4 election cycles, the average movement of a debate has been for about 1.7%, which is minuscule. The most we've ever seen, I heard this on a podcast this morning on PodSafe, was 4%. And it was the Romney Obama debate where he tanked so bad. There was a 4% bump in overall average of the polls. That's what these are. So look, this is all baked in. It's not going to move much, but you don't have it to move much to have a big impact. Correct. I think it will have an impact. Correct. Yeah, Mike and Mike can go back and forth on this. There's a couple more things I want to hit on is, I'm one of the few consultants, we talk about this, who, grew up in a trailer house. I had never been to college. But one of my other careers when I worked in the mill, and we've talked about this, is I was a bouncer in a club. And that's not shocking to people, but I know bullies and have watched men react with women, watch bullies, and ain't nothing I hate worse than a bully. Somebody wants to pick on somebody smaller than people that talk a lot of shit, but they never really been in a fist fight.
Right.
That's Donald Trump. He couldn't look at her last night because she came out and put him right on his heels when she sought him out and chased him around that little podium to shake his hand and go like, I'm Kamala Harris and I'm finna whoop your ass. She didn't say that, but that's what she did with that move, which rocked him from the get-go. Because the first thing my granddaddy taught me about a bully is if you hit them in their mouth, they won't bother you ever again. And she did that verbally and with her eyes last night, and even with her laugh. And he couldn't look at her. That's just stuck with me all night. He couldn't look at her because he's a bully and he's not used to having somebody face to face going, come on, boy, let's do it. Me, I ain't scared of you. I'm 4'5", 5'4", and I'm not scared of you. And so
I'm a black woman.
Oh my God. I didn't even think about her being a black woman. Right.
Oh,
yes.
It's just devastating. She emasculated him.
Exactly.
She humiliated him. And that is not something that's a situation he has probably never, ever been in before. in a one-on-one where he can't blame anybody else but himself. They're still trying to blame the moderators. Like when you're still blaming the refs after you lost by 30 points, like it ain't the refs. Even if the refs were biased, which they weren't, that ain't what the outcome, that's what caused the outcome of the game here. And it was just so telling. Go ahead.
And there's a way to do this, y'all. I love Kamala Harris. I hope she wins. I'm working for the super PAC, making a few ads for them. Like I work for Democrats. But as a strategist, there's a way to come after her. There's a way you could have won this last night very easily for Donald Trump. And there's a group of people out there who are wanting a reason not to vote for her. And if he'd have walked out on stage and said to the American public, no matter what question is asked, he could answer it in this way. If your life is better off than it was 4 years ago when I was president, she's your candidate. But if you are tired because bread was $1.29 when I was president, and now it's $3.10, gas was $2, now it's $3, and a dozen of eggs was $1.29 when I was president, you need to vote for me because it's their fault. And this is totally bullshit. But that's how you win. I'm not talking about what's right or wrong.
That's right.
But you win by tying her to people's grievances around bread, gas, butter, the cost of daycare, whatever the hell it is.
All of it.
You make her own that.
Yeah.
And you don't, every time she opens her mouth, you make her own that. It's bullshit. But I'm just talking about debate 101. This is not me being anti-Vice President Harris. Right. I'm just saying it was that easy for him to win last night. Right, Mike?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's just politics. That's the way it works, is when, things are going in the wrong direction, you blame the incumbent party. He did that somewhat effectively at the close, but by the closing, the game was over. The game was over. I mean, you were 3-4 touchdowns behind. Like, great. You punted a great field goal. Congratulations. You nailed it right between the crossbars. So what? It was over. And that was his problem, is that he just his team could not keep the old man in the game. And she just, I think, came loaded for bear, and she delivered. And here's the tough part, I think, and I always think as the political strategist, like, what am I doing if I'm Chris LaCivita or Susie Wiles? I'm running Trump's campaign. First, I'm probably packing my bags and trying to get the hell out of there in the middle of the night and escape from the nightmare that he was going to be. I mean, dude showed up in the spin room. That's how bad it was. A candidate showed up in the spin room to try to spin his own way out of the mess that he created. If you don't think Donald Trump lost, he knows he lost. He knows how bad it was. He showed up all sweaty and melting and was trying to be like, I've seen polls showing 92% that I won, and just the craziness,
the desperation,
it was the reeking air of desperation was just emanating off of him. And the most important thing, like I said, look, I'm a data guy. I look at the polls. I look at the numbers. Yeah, there's not going to be a lot of movement, but this told us everything we need to know about the trajectory of the next 55 or so days. This is who they are now. Donald Trump is not going to gather his feet around him. He's going to keep doubling down on whether or not that immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, are eating pets or not. Like, that's what he's going to do. And so she has created the recipe to not only beat him, but to have him marginalize himself. He's like a cat chasing his own tail now. And what she's got to do with that opening is reassure the country that a non-traditional candidate like herself can be the president of the United States. If she's able to do that half as successfully over the course of the next 50 days as she did last night, I put my money on her.
Yeah. And one of the things about the excitement that we haven't talked about is, and if you watch any of the Twitter from Target Smart or other folks about who's registering, there's a lot of people registering to vote in the last 30, 50, 60 days. And the Democrats are outpacing the Republicans in every state that I saw, except for Florida and maybe Ohio by a hair. And it's like, normally, first of all, none of those people are being talked to by posters. But normally, most of those people don't show up and vote on election day either. I mean, this is just me and Mike giving you a little 101. But does that mean something different? There was a lot of people in 2016 that posters never talked to who showed up to vote for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And if you think that didn't happen, you're lying to yourself. The real question, because Mike and me talk about the margins, is will a lot of these new registrants who nobody's talked to actually show up and are motivated, to Mike's great analysis about enthusiasm? Because that's where you start thinking about a higher percentage of new registrants actually showing up and voting that folks don't see. I'm not giving you a conspiracy theory about how polls are wrong. I'm just saying all these little slices do affect that, right, Mike?
Yeah, not only that, but we're talking about that in the earlier segment in North Carolina. There are groups that are not looked at. And we are now at the stage of a campaign where the tactics, as you mentioned, you're a great tactician, one of the best the Democrats have. It comes down to ground game. It comes down to execution. The strategies are set now, folks. It is. There's more than enough money on both sides to do everything that they need to do. There are clear advantages that Harris has. She's got a bigger ground game than the Republicans have. Now they've got to execute with it and try to see if they can't leverage that advantage. There is an issues set that benefits, I think, Kamala Harris in most places. Trump can be competitive on immigration and competitive on the economy, as long as he's not the messenger. The paid stuff is going to matter now. The airtime is bought. The messaging is largely set. It's all execution, execution, execution. But there are these small things you need to look at. What are registration numbers looking like? Where are there surges happening? How many uncounted voters that are new to the voter model? How many are there? Where are they at? And can that each respective party get out their base? Can they get out those votes? And this is kind of like the fog of war now. It's like you watch those battle scenes, in movies. If you're up close and in the grind, if you're in the mosh pit of a battle, you don't know who's winning. You just don't. It just looks like swords are swinging and shields are flying and mud's kicking up and blood's being spat out everywhere. But when it gets down to it, the generals up on the hill looking out are seeing and making their small adjustments to see whose army performs better, and that's where we're at. That's where we're at this moment in time. Whose army is going to perform better, and who's better positioned to win this thing? I think there's a lot of tactical advantages that benefit Kamala Harris, but we are just going to have to see if she can overcome some of the fundamentals. It's
going to be really interesting. I want to thank all of y'all for tuning in. We're going to have a great podcast next week to go over a lot more of this stuff and dig deep. I want to thank our sister Irene for coming on and giving us the deep dive. That was so fascinating about North Carolina. For you YouTube listeners and watchers who see me here in this tie, I'm fixing to go on CNN and give people, unlike Mike Madrid, that respect my opinion, what happened with the debate last night. And also a special announcement that I don't even think Mike Madrid knows. But for those of you listening who live in the Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland area, on October 1st in Washington, D.C., at a restaurant on Capitol Hill called Paraíso, one of the only Mexican restaurants up on Capitol Hill, we're going to be having a book party for Mike. But more importantly than just having a book party is me and Andres, who's also on this podcast, who you never hear about, has figured out how we can do a live recording of this podcast the book party in Washington, D.C. on October 1st. Evidently, all I have to do is show up with this microphone and my laptop. That's the reason we're being able to pull this off. And me and Mike are going to record a live studio audience podcast at the book signing party on October 1st from 5 o'clock in the afternoon until 7 o'clock, because I go to bed at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening in Washington, D.C. We'll give you more updates because it's still like 3 weeks away, but we're going to have a live recording, Mike, of the podcast. You can invite all your old Georgetown friends, all your old ex-girlfriends, all your former college professors from D.C. to come show up at the book party. Is there anything else I need to know about your Washington, D.C. roots?
Well, let me just say this. I did not know this. This is a great honor. I appreciate you, Chuck, a good friend, putting all this stuff together. Andreas, we'll have you out there too. Look, this here's what. Everybody come out and check this out. October 1st. What's the time again?
It's 5 to 7 at Paraíso Mexican Restaurant in D.C.
Paraíso Restaurant, 5 to 8, October 1st. This is going to be a mix of Latino politico types and never Trump Republicans. So this is going to be the most, right? That made Chuck laugh. It's going to be the most eclectic group you've ever seen. I'm really looking forward to this. We're going to have a great political conversation. And I love the fact that we're going to be able to do a live show. I think you're going to love it. Don't miss it. Where do people need to RSVP, Chuck? Or do they just show up?
Yep. We're going to be sending out stuff, but DM me if you want to come, because we only have so much room. We can't take thousands of people. So DM me or Mike if you're in the DC area, and we'll put you on the list. We'll have a big security guard with a mouthpiece and all of that there to make sure none of my ex-girlfriends or Mike's get in the place. But come out and see us. Don't forget to like the podcast, share the podcast. Don't forget to call your mom if you're blessed to still have her with us. And let's go and see you next week. Take care now.